Malbec, Carmenere, Tannat, three very important varietals in South America. But this is just some really cool information. Neither of these grapes are from South America, and their stories are really cool. Carmenere. The interesting thing about this varietal is it's actually a member of the Cabernet Sauvignon family. And back in the day, way back in the day, in Bordeaux, it was a prominent grape in the Bordeaux blends, mostly over in the Médoc area. And at some point, this thing called phylloxera came and destroyed 85% of Europe's vines. Europe, not just France, but all of Europe, in 6 years, 85% of the vines destroyed. And they finally figured out how to fix it after 6 years. But by the time they figured this out and saved all their vines and replanted and everything was back on track, Carmenere was pretty much non-existent in France. By that time, this Frenchman named Claudio Gay had come down to Chile and started this little greenhouse. And in that greenhouse, where he studied all these little exotic plants, he brought some Vitis vinifera. Vitis vinifera is just any vine you find from in Europe: Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Cab Franc, all the grapes that we know. In that greenhouse, he had Carmenere. And so, for a while, Carmenere was just sitting in the greenhouse, and eventually it made its way out into the countryside, and it made its way into the vineyards, and as history went on, it tended to, what happened was Merlot and Carmenere were pretty much interplanted within vineyards. Now, the funny thing about that is Carmenere, one bunch of grapes of Carmenere and one bunch of grapes of Merlot, they look different, but it was none the wiser. Everyone just started making it. So you had this sort of Carmenere-Merlot blend, but no one knew it. Everyone thought it was Merlot. Fast forward to the 1990s, where we figured out how to do DNA profiling. In 1994, we found out that Carmenere is actually its own varietal and not Merlot. So what happened was they started ripping up all the Carmenere and recategorizing it, putting the Carmenere away from the Merlot, but then they started to continue blending the Merlot and the Carmenere because that's what we all knew. And eventually Carmenere became its own 100% varietal, and now what we know as Carmenere is Chile's national grape. The reason why Chile has it as its national grape because Chile has a very unique climate. Phylloxera, the mite that destroyed all those vines in Europe, doesn't like Chile. Chile is phylloxera free. So the Carmenere that you drink from Chile is phylloxera free. And this is why they can call this their national grape. Now, Malbec is a very interesting thing too. Malbec is actually from an area just south of Bordeaux called the Cahors, C-A-H-O-R-S. The Cahors is a continental climate. It's kind of in the middle, sort of away from the ocean, away from any maritime breezes, in this little foggy, sort of like bucolic area of France. And in that area, they call it not Malbec. Well, they do call it Malbec, but they mostly call it Cot, C-O-T. And when it was vinified in France, it was really dark and olive-like and black. And the British actually called it the black wine because it was really, really dark. It made its way over to Argentina. There was a lot, in South America, there was a lot of immigration from Europe to South America, and it made its way to Mendoza. And they found that in that soil, the varietal, even though it's not the same soil as the Cahors, does very well. If you strain the vine a little bit, it creates really nice, ripe, dark fruits, but more brighter, but not brighter. Still dark and concentrated, but there's more going on. It added more complexity, more roundness to the varietal. And then what they did is they took these little PVC pipes and they ran them along the vines and they punched holes in them and they let the water run through the pipes and they do something called drip irrigation. The water just kind of drips into the soil, straining the vines, forcing the vines to create bigger, riper grapes. And that's why the Malbecs that we know from Argentina are really big and juicy and spicy and smoky. But in the Cahors, if you can still get them. We have them here at Alphabet City Wine Company. If you live in New York City, come by, check it out. We have some awesome Cahors wine, 100% Malbec. You can have one of those and you're going to taste something different. It's going to be more leaner, it's going to be a little darker, it's going to have a little more olive, like black olive on the nose. Now, Tannat is a really interesting thing too. Tannat is originally from France as well, in the same area, southwestern France. So you had Bordeaux, and then you have Cahors, and then that whole southeastern part of France is called southwestern part of France. It's called Southwest France. That's where Tannat is from, closer to the Basque country. And Basque immigrants came to Uruguay, and they brought Tannat to Uruguay. In that area of France, or the Basque region where Tannat is grown, very, very heavy tannic wines. When they brought it to Uruguay, Uruguay is all plains. It's all just grassy plains, pretty much. And in southwest France, where they had it, it was like the hills of the Pyrenees. So they had a colder climate, their soil had less nutrients in it, and it brought more structure and more muscle to the wine. But when they grow it in Uruguay, it's hotter, of course, and there's more nutrients in the soil, so the grapes tend to be a little riper and juicier. So when you produce a Tannat in Uruguay, it's going to be a little easier to approach. If you have a Tannat from the southwestern part of France, it's going to be very austere and very tannic. So these are three really cool varietals that came from Europe to South America that are known as South American wines, because of in the countries that the grapes are growing, they're known as their wines. When you think of Argentina, you think of Malbec. When you think of Chile, you think of Carmenere. When you think of Uruguay, if anybody does, that should, you think of Tannat. If you see a Tannat on the market, the Tannat is pretty much from Uruguay. So that kind of is an idea, it kind of gives you an idea of where the history of these wines come from. And this is random craziness, wine to people.